Okay, so today we're going to be learning about the airplane pre-flight for the Cessna Skyhawk 172. Before we can start the pre-flight for in the cabin, we will first plug in the headsets, remove the pitot tube, remove the rudder gust lock, get the ladder out if needed to check the fuel up top, and we will call for fuel if needed. And for when we're at air direct, this is the phone number for Infinity Fuel right here, so we'll write that one down. So now going into details, plugging in the headsets. We will plug the headsets in below the dash, below the ignition key for the Skyhawks. Right here is where that will be used. The pitot cover will then be removed and should be placed behind the seat. The rudder gust lock should be removed from the back of the airplane during the pre-flight so that the plane has control of the rudder. The gust lock is released by spinning the bolt and then with two hands pulling away from the center of the vertical stabilizer. Next, you should grab the dipstick out of the back seat of the pilot seat and climb up to the top of the wing and check to see how much fuel is in each tanks. Each airplane is different, so you'll need to check to see how many gallons the plane holds. That can be found on the fuel selector inside the plane or in the POH. And once again, we have the phone number, which is located right here for Infinity Fuel at Nashua. Now this is the checklist for inside the cabin, and we'll go into details now. First, we will check the hob and tach times. The tach time is located under the RPM, located here, where the hobs is located up here on the far right. These numbers should match what your dispatch sheet is given to you from dispatch and should be sheet correct times. Currency and airworthiness should be also checked. As learned about in earlier lessons, you should make sure the aircraft is current and that required aircraft documents are in the airplane. These can be found in the side pocket and or behind the co-pilot seat. What you're looking for is both the AVA acronym here and AERO here. Both very important, and you cannot fly without them. It's illegal. Next, you want to remove the control wheel lock. The control wheel lock slides straight up and should be stored in the side pocket by where your left leg will be when you're seated in the airplane. Next, you will want to make sure your ignition switch here and your avionics switch here are both in the off position. And then we'll move to this. We will then turn our master on. After those, we will do these steps here. We will follow master on, then we will check our fuel gauges. We will lower our flaps down and turning on all of our lights along with our pitot heat. After doing those steps, we will do a walk around, checking that the flaps are down and all lights are working, and as well as the pitot heat is working by touching the pitot tube to make sure it's warming up. Next, to finishing up the cabin. After the walk around, you should check the alternate static, looking for the VSI needle to jump a little, then turning the fuel selector to both. At the same time as this, you want to make sure you turn off your master switch as well. Next, we will go over the empennage. We'll be going over surface, antennas, elevator, trim tab, and the tail tie down. Surfaces. You should start by checking all around the airplane surfaces. This includes the bottom two. You're looking for dents, cracks in the airframe that may make flying dangerous and unsafe. Antennas. Make sure all the antennas are intact and accounted for. There should be two comm antennas above each pilot, here and here as stated. An ELT attached to the tail. The nav are located on the vertical stabilizer. And remember, because they make the V like a VOR up here on the tail. And then the GPS small box on the top front labeled GPS can be better seen when checking for the fuel. There. The elevator. The elevator should be checked to make sure that it has full range, both up and down. This is done by carefully lifting it up and then putting it back down. Also check to make sure the trim tab moves when the elevator is lifted and lowered. So you have your elevator is here, and then this little tab on the right hand side of the elevator is your trim tab. While checking this, it should move smoothly and there should be no damage to any of it. Next, we'll do the rudder and the tail tie down. The rudder should be checked for full deflection left to right. You check the rudder by grabbing it from the base where it's the strongest and the middle, right about here. The bottom hand does the moving while the top hand is just a guide, because you don't want to bend the metal. At this point, you should also remove the tail tie down, which is located below the rudder. Do not, in any circumstances, touch the rudder trim tab, which is this little thing right here. That's been specially aligned. Next, we'll go over the right wing. And these are the things we will be checking on our right wing. First, we will be checking the wing flap. The wing flap should be lowered already, since you did that while you were in the cabin. The flap should have a little bit of a wiggle when you grab it. The center rod should twist, and the other two should be checked to make sure they are sturdy and the tracks line up. The red center pin, as you can see, should twist side to side, and the blue ones should be checked to make sure they are on the tracks. The ailerons. The aileron should be checked for full deflection both up and down against the opposite rudder. The best way to do this is by standing on the outside of the plane, not underneath the actual wing. And when you lift one rudder up, you will want to make sure the other rudder goes down. Sorry, not the rudder, the aileron goes down. Like the flaps, the center pin should be twisted, which can be found a little to the right of this, about right in the middle of the aileron. Also check there are 3 counterweights at the far end of the wingtip and the hinges are all intact. Next, we have the wingtip, leading edge, and strut. The wingtip and leading edge should be smooth when you run over it with your hand. Check that the vents are close to the fuselage are not clogged. Check that the strut is strong and connected to both the fuselage and the wing. Also, untie the tie down at this point, which is located right here. Main gear and brake tire. The main gear should be inspected that is in good condition and tires are pumped up, and that the brake pads are still there and not have worn down. There should be no bald spot on the tire larger than your hand. The red arrow indicates where you can find the brake pad. Fuel tank sumping. The fuel tank should be sumped to check that no water is mixed with the fuel. If water is found, you should continue to sump until no water is left. You want to make sure you do this to every single sump there is on the wing. Some of the Skyhawks have more than one sump. Fuel filler cap and wing surfaces. Check the filler cap is on properly and the wing surface is clean of debris and ice. The cap should be straight lined so that when flying to help make more aerodynamic. If it is not straight up and down like this, then it is not securely fastened. Next, we'll go over the nose. The cowling. Check the cowling to make sure the bolts are in and tight, both the horizontal and vertical sections. So we have here and here. Let's see with the circles. Engine oil and fuel strainer. Pull the engine oil dipstick out and make sure there's an adequate amount of oil. You want to check the POH to make sure you have the correct amount. The dipstick has numbers on it that line up for checking how much oil is in there. Also, you want to pull the fuel strainer for 6 seconds. This is sumping your engine, which is here. And if your airplane does not have this, just like the wings, there will be little push tabs. You want to climb under the engine and do those tabs to drain fuel. Exhaust pipe, nose gear, strut, and tire. Check the exhaust pipe is attached and clear debris. Check there is no damage to the nose gear or cracks in the strut. Check that the tire isn't flat and no large bald spots are on the tire. The shimmy dampener, engine air filter, and air intake. Check the shimmy dampener. There should be about 3 fingers between the pieces of metal, which is located here also about the same size as a pack of cigarettes on its side, is a good way to think of it. Engine air intake should also be clear and the filter should be clean. The propeller, spinner, and alternator belt. Run hands over the propeller and the spinner to check for cracks or dents. When checking, the propeller chips shouldn't be able to stop a fingernail. If they can, it needs to go to maintenance. The alternator belt is found behind the spinner inside the plane and should be pulled to check it's tight. If not, it should be tightened and also brought to maintenance to do so. You should also run your hands over the spinner on both sides just to make sure it's smooth and all intact. Next, we have the static port. The static port should be checked to make sure it is clear and nothing is blocking it. You do not want to put your finger on the static port because that could clog it, so just make sure at all costs not to put your hand over that hole. Next, we will check the windshield. Check the windshield that it is clear and there are no cracks. Now we will check the left side of the cowling. Just like on the right side, make sure all the bolts are accounted for and properly secured. Now we will go to our left wing, following these steps. Fuel filler cap and wing surfaces. Check that the filler cap is on properly and the wing surfaces clean of debris, ice. The cap should be straight line to help more aerodynamic. Just like on the other wing, you want it to be like that. The wingtip, leading edge, and strut. Just like on the other side, you want to make sure the wingtip and leading edge should be smooth when you run your hand over it, and check that the vents are not clogged. Check the strut is strong and connected to both the fuselage and the wing. Also untie the tail tie down at this point, which you can see the tie down is right here. Next, we have the pitot tube. The pitot tube should be inspected very well. Check the ram air hole inlet, which you can see is right here, is not clogged. Make sure the static hole and drain holes are also not covered. There is a static hole here and also one on the top, plus a drain hole back here. You want to make sure are all clear. A fuel tank vent and warning slot. Check the fuel tank vent and stall warning slot to make sure there are no blockages. If your fuel tank vent is here, which is located just underneath the back side of the strut where it connects to the wing, and on the front side, you have the stall warning slot just in front of where the strut meets the wing. We have the wingtip, aileron, and flaps now. Just like on the other side, you should check them properly. Run your hand over the wingtip to make sure it is smooth and not falling off and in one piece. The aileron should be checked for full deflection both up and down against the opposite aileron. When one is up, the other should be down. Check that there is also the 3 counterweights. The wing flap should be lowered already since you did that while in the cabin. The flap should have a little bit of wiggle when you grab it. The center rod should twist and the other 2 should be checked to make sure their tracks are lined up, just like you did on the other flaps as well. Next, we will finish up with the main gear and tire. The main gear should be inspected as in good conditions. Tires are pumped up and the brake pads are still there and working properly. There should be no spalts larger than your hand on the tire. And then fuel tank sumping. The fuel tank should be sumped to check there is no water like on the other side, and if there is, you will want to continue sumping until there is no water left. The last step after this is to do a full 360 around the airplane to make sure you didn't miss anything while doing your pre-flight. This just helps with redundancy. All right, thank you.